every time I speak about projects, I ask myself where to begin. I mean, I think it's a question always for projects, specifically the one that are so kind of complex. And I would say, speaking about data apartheid, you already can tell that this is a very contested territory, contested geographical territory, contested digital territory, but also discursive one. And I think maybe the privilege of speaking the second is that part of what you can do to address the endless question of where to begin is actually to pull some threads from what Ariel was speaking about. And maybe the two immediate one will be the very, very complex question of like, who tells the story? What story can I tell? So I'm was born in Israel. I actually, after 20 plus years, just reside in Tel Aviv. So the question of like, can I voice a question? What's my role of it? In kind of on the front of what's sometimes become a form of policing itself, of like, of identity politics and the question of voice. But also, and I think Uriel spoke quite a few times you spoke about ghosts, and other terms will be, I don't know, ontology, afterness, and others, and like, kind of states of violence that keep ripples and live among us in different topologies and geographies. But what I'm looking at now is almost a reverse case, because it's in some ways, extreme state of apartheid or colonialism in the making. But if we look at AI and other form of data-driven control technology, it's almost colonialism in the future. And the question of perspective, it becomes even more convoluted and tangled and just kind of impossible how to look at. And also, and I know all of us are makers and thinking of between, spatial and visual practices. This is a project that is in its beginning, and it's kind of moving forwards and backwards between practices and the ability to think about a vast question with practices, and more, I would say, word-based, discursive, theoretical research. So I'm going to share a few things, and almost there aren't so many images. But when I asked myself where to begin before this presentation, I wanted to maybe remind, kind of reassure you that I can make images and make them sometimes in form of video performance to others, but also share with you how I came to the set of argumentation that kind of led me to the question of data apartheid. So I recently completed a major project which was both the 3-channel video installation, has some performative elements as well, but also theoretical research that look at the National Museum of Brazil, that with its 20 million objects that burn into ashes only 5 years ago. And what I was looking at more specifically is the very, very few digital remains. So what was kind of shocking back then is that one would think that in the age of hyper-documentation and algorithmic reproduction, the ratio of what would survive, at least in the digital, will be maybe a little bit better than the Library of Alexandria, but almost nothing survived in the digital realm. And I took those digital remains, which are very, very different in their natures, as an entry point for research, and ended up also to think about them almost as a site of intervention. And from that, because one of the things that survive is a virtual tour made by Google. which one actually, that has nothing to do not with Brazil and not with the museum, but one can actually visit the no longer existing museum. And through that, I kind of delved into a much major research in the institution of Google Art and Culture, and with the ambition of being the museum of the world. And you spoke about reinstitution. So just maybe as a side note, we can speak about it more later. The fact that while a lot of European museums are invested in digitization and asking themselves the moral question of where their objects belong, and the opportunity of returning, which is already very, very complex, they're also somehow collaborated and sometimes actually, kind of being used to a new form of colonialism. That the kind of the main framework I would argue is digital colonialism, and I wanted to kind of link it to a former project, maybe to kind of introduce, I don't know. And I think when Maria and I spoke about it, we spoke that the digital and the data worlds of colonialism maybe discussed less in this forum. So maybe just to briefly say that, well, before I go to that, the main argument of digital colonialism that has been kind of brought from both STS and a lot of critical law, but also, of course, critical technology studies and others, propose that the relation between us and our data are colonial relations. And if colonialism, very, very kind of briefly and broadly, is based on system of exploitation, disposition of various kind of properties, extractivism, and concentration of power, there are kind of striking similarities between us and the use of data today and those kind of systems. I think probably about extractivism you spoke quite a bit, but with one major shift from more traditional classic colonialism, that there is a shift on sovereignty. So instead of power being concentrated by monarchy or later on the nation state, there is a shift of power and also those kind of colonial relation, which the sovereignty is now held in power of big tech corporation. So a classic argumentation example of that set of argumentation will be that the biggest number of I know Facebook or Meta users are in India, but all the profits and all other kind of data, information, and so on will go to California. Okay, so that will be like more a classic one. I was study it very carefully within the cultural arena, and more specifically the institutional arena of like large collections. And that will be probably the moment I started, that's like 2 years ago, I started to look at what we know about the kind of the case of case of apartheid in the occupied territories in those terms. And it's important for me to say because there are many different concerns and people enter a problematic or kind of specifically about apartheid, that you almost never have perspective, right? You're living in kind of a horrendous political situation that the news will keep piling all the time. So kind of knowing what's the perspective you're looking at, that it's kind of the question. I think it's helpful to understand. And if I spoke about problematics and where to begin, I would also say, and I kind of let myself be very kind of peer-to-peer here, because these are not final work that I have a perspective or kind of a distance from, is that when I speak about contested grounds, I speak about like the level of terminology is very unstable. The use of the term apartheid is impossible to, well, it's impossible to fund and impossible to work in an academic institution with, but it's also with among like political philosophers, these will be very questionable. And just recently, a couple of months ago, Francesca Albana, the General Secretary of the UN, I mean, there are many reports, human rights reports that kind of showing and proving for the last couple of years, and a lot of work, theoretical work made by legal activists to show how the case of occupation, the Israeli occupation, is falling into conditions of apartheid. But these are mainly made by NGOs until now. And this recent report, if someone is interested, is kind of showing how the conditions of occupation in the territories are falling or falling into conditions of apartheid. However, Albana did say that this is not, the case of apartheid does not describe all. I mean, you spoke about Deir Yassin before. So the case of apartheid is not describing, let's say, the 48 refugees. It's not describing or the case in East Jerusalem, but it is it is fitting the category of like the situation in the occupied territories does fit into conditions of apartheid. So, and this, I'm sharing it with you because I think it's not very common to work in a situation that you can hardly move. Like every word you use, every term you use, every perspective you use, every conversation you engage with, you are, as the maker, thinker, brought back. I'm interested maybe from you might be to hear artists from the Ukraine or from Russia who share similar experience, but it's writing from the event and trying not to produce journalistic work, but quite a different one. And I think this is for us, it's a challenge. It's an interesting place to be. So this is just a screen grab from my Google search about 2 weeks ago. It was the Israeli Independence Day, which is also, well, also the Palestinian Nakba Day, or a separation of 1 week. And that was the Google, kind of search bar and that day. And maybe Google is the easiest one to start. But that's remind me of this quite amazing picture back from 2016 when Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, came to Israel for a visit, and the Israeli military, nothing less, was made this arrangement for him. And I think it's Netanyahu that said that during that visit that this is Israel's science, sun, and Google. And that's, I think, for me, one of the interesting thing. And I'm going back to this idea of digital colonialism, because when there is a scholarly work about digital colonialism, people, I mean, as I mentioned before, there is a suggestion that there is a shift of power between the nation state to corporate power. However, the Israeli case is especially interesting because the occupation of the Palestinian territories is definitely a national project. It's a Zionist project. It is, in the center of it is fighting for the identity of the nation state. However, and I don't know whoever from you, some of you have some Israeli ties, heard the terms startup nation. You probably know that Israel is a tiny, small in geography, but quite an authority when it comes to high tech. So I think after a few major countries, it's like, I don't know if number 3, 4, 5, don't catch me on the number, but very high up in the number of IPOs. And it's this Israeli, and it's interesting, the term startup nation also offering a lot of what we can be very critical about Israelis, of like the fast move, the solution is kind of very solution oriented, cutting corner, aggressive one as a quality that actually helped them to become very productive within the startup, which stage, which is the Israelis, technology's dream is, of course, not to maintain the big Googles of the world, but to start up, really to start up and then to be purchased, blah, 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 blah. So there is, and as the critique on Israel is growing in the world as a Zionist project, Israel, I think, and I think there's quite a bit of writing about it, but that the identity around technology is being tightened and tightened, and it's almost becoming that the technology sphere is the new form of Zionism. And therefore, there is some sort of, again, of entanglement between the classic nation and the corporation technology solution, because in this startup nation, these, and people like Bibi Netanyahu and many, many others, ambassadors, technology ambassadors will suggest that these are not inseparable anymore. So, if by many would say about that Google is acting like laws, information infrastructures as Google or socio-technical constellations. So these are, I would say, pretty kind of well familiar ideas that Google are no longer a technical infrastructure, right? It's a social, political, also material base and technological in constellation, that it doesn't start and end. I usually tell my students that if even 10 years ago, I was still living in Brooklyn and people speaking about opting out from services like Google and Amazon, these are this position of critical position about technology is no longer possible, right? I mean, like we all somehow, as a second or third way, subject for use of cloud services and other services. So the idea of like being separated from those constellations, it's like it's almost in the ether, it's in the air, are almost not available for us anymore. And if I started with Google right when I moved here, and maybe you read about it lately, Israel just launched the Nimbus project that was on the Ayalon Highway, this major sign saying, I called it Google on Israel's terms. So it says cloud on Israel's term. So the term Israel's term is actually taking from Oslo agreements. What's on Palestinian terms? So this is a small but quite kind of important anecdote how the entire political, geographical, technological, and economical relations are being kind of merged into a new new entanglement where there is almost impossible way to separate between more kind of traditional institutional hierarchies like the state and horizontal network state entities. So Nimbus is a project that the Israeli state actually paid or rented, hired, depends on the level, Google services to have all the storage and cloud services of the state. So that includes some more kind of physical infrastructural elements of actually making room, making grounds on agricultural states to have all the physical infrastructure of the of the cloud services, but it also, so this is the brochure, but it also has been published last year already. This is a slide from a Nimbus users, so it's made by Google, for Nimbus users, kind of educational presentation that show how Google is renting on a service-based rental to the state of Israel technologies of face recognition, AI-based face recognitions, sound-based and identification as technologies, and others that are used on civilians population in the occupied territories. And maybe to kind of finish with another examples from the launch of this event, which I had someone taking pictures for me. I love these slides when they say, Yalla, Israel, let's get solving. So just to maybe slow down on each one of the terms, Yalla is in Arabic. So Yalla Israel, sometimes people say about the most common term in Israel is Yalla Bye. Yalla in Arabic and Bye is obviously in English, but it's probably the most common term in the Hebrew language. So Yalla, let's go. Yalla Israel, let's get solving. So I think the element of Israeli, best engineers, all of them kind of emerge from military training that use advanced technologies, being hired for different tech companies and very known for, because this is a cutting corner culture, they are not so much caught like other, maybe European, countries in the procedures and the policies. They are here to get solving. So this is kind of just another visual culture moment. But this project that I'm working on, which has both, again, theoretical and practice elements, suggesting that, and I'm working here with Anna Decker, that's the we, that the reality of occupation is being lately, in the last 10 years or so, supported by and managed through many digital means and more, and that's what AI and data-driven technologies under like 5 different categories. One is discrimination and prevention of access to digital services. So phone companies, and this is like mobile networks. That's probably will be the best examples. Censorship via corporations. So removing of hashtags, identifying Israel. Basically, Israel asked Meta to, about specific words or about specific hashtags. So and tell Meta that these words are helping terrorist acts. So basically kind of dilution or weakening of any possibilities for collective resistance that are being made through digital tools, mapping and navigation services biases. I'll give a few examples, but basically these are, using Google Maps and Waze, which is Israeli technology owned now by Google, which used for navigations. Occupied Palestinian territories in the occupied territories are being misrepresented, by following the claim coming to Google. This is, a kind of a secret military zones. So please just blur the area. So there are either the resolution is very low or there is a block in the map. Also, if you're Israeli and you try to navigate in the occupied territory, Waze will find the shorter route for you, like for you guys. But if you're Palestinian and you're trying to navigate between villages, that oftentimes would either present it as impossible or give you like the longest, most complicated route without reporting about different watches, different like stops on the way and so on and so forth. Innovation based on military technology. This is kind of the most known examples that in Israeli army, that there is many units, but there's one that is very, very known, that is the technology-based intelligence, that most of the officers and the people, the individuals that serve in these units are kind of then moving to the startup land. So they're becoming the the founders of the hottest company later on. And part of that is that innovation-based military technology and militarization, just a second, that part of it is that a lot of those now non-military technologies are based on things that started to develop in the military, but also use the occupied territory as basically experimental lab. And to use the Hannah Arendt, the Palestinians don't have the rights to have rights. So basically, those technologies, like the terminology of what privacy, the right for privacy and others, is very kind of Wild West. So there are kind of several ways of exercise military abilities within with the commercial technologies to use the West Bank as kind of land for experimentation. Militarization of digital knowledge, and obviously data surveillance. I already showed one example, I'll show more. And historical erasure of the conflict through lack of digitization or erasure of archives. How are we doing with time? Probably not great. Okay. So maybe to kind of summarize two things, I would like to propose that this form of occupation is much complicated it's some sort of an invisible or intangible form of occupation. So these are systems that outgrows from corporate state military sphere of computation, but represent an invisible and non-tangible form of colonization. They allow new forms of domination that are much harder to caption or to document, which make them, and I think this is important, a very slippery object of critique. And this could be artistic critique, theoretical critique, quantitative, qualitative, and many others. It's very hard to show. It's very hard to capture. How do you, and I think within the kind of artistic realm, we ask many times about things that belong to the past, to use Oriel's term of ghosts. How do we capture something that is in the weather, to use Christina Sharp, in the atmosphere, is impossible to capture, but is definitely here. We can feel it on our body, we can feel it in our neck, we can feel it in our level of kind of fear and so on, and in the affective, but we don't see it, cannot feel it. I feel like when we speak about data occupation or data colonialization, we face similar kind of concern that the access to knowledge is very, very limited, or the access to data. And although we know it's there, it's not very easy to capture. And these are just examples. I don't know if we have time. I'm happy to share them later, of like use of military technologies that go, public, use of different kind of simulations that develop in the IDF and then are being practiced on images of the occupied territories. Use and blockage of digital media, a lot of this work has been made by Hamle Institute, which is a fantastic, like the most important institution to think about the Arab world in general and Palestine specifically in terms of digital rights. And they write a lot about digital media and and different computational platforms. This is what I like to approach as the production of disorientation. So this is the announcement you'll get from Google Map or from Waze when you try to navigate a specific area. So basically, this kind of navigation or this part of the map is being blocked, unavailable, not now, closed military zone, and so on and so forth. Or what I just gave as an example before, the short way to navigate between Ramallah and Nablus, or the very, very, very long way, which is also depends not only on the road, not only on the kind of geographical proximity, but also the quality of the road. So, 4 hours, something that can take 50 minutes. Like as I say, this is an ongoing research, and it phase or kind of I'm thinking about it through different kind of outlets or routes. Or paths. One is more theoretical thinking, and I kind of how can we think about the production of this orientation with the possibility of counter geographies. Some existing technology I write about iNakba, which also called iReturn now. You can try it on your phone. You can actually try it online. This is more, it's produced, it's released last year by an organization called Zohorot. And it's more of archival work, so it's not a dynamic map that is collecting all the information of refugees and demolished villages of basically Palestinian presence in the occupied or in the Israeli-Palestinian territories pre-48. In my writing at the moment, we think about both physical land-based navigation and digital navigation, and thinking about I write about transductive navigation as a form of study, as a form of, and we try to think about navigation also as a collective navigation as a form of witnessing, in relation to archive and collection, in relation to what Uriel said about, you showed one moment from Deir Yassin about like an erased geography or erased landscape. So this is kind of, this is part of what I do. And then when I'm trying to think with visual practices, so also when I do or make projects of navigation, some of them are more performance-based, collaborative, participate, and we kind of experiment with the idea of being in a hybrid state between digital and physical level, working with different kind of stakeholders about what does it mean to navigate together, and kind of active witnessing through the digital. But other things that I'm kind of in the early stages of trying to think, like my interest in the iNakba, iReturn, is because it's a product. Problematic with that is not it's not interactive at all. It's very archival, actually. And what I try to do is to actually what the settlers, the Zionist religious settlers have, which is more interactive maps of point of interest, way of gathering, form of collectivization, testimonies and memories and others, to form some sort of a more open-ended map that orients Palestine through different technologies, but also through different, focus on the subjectives, focus not on so much about the forensic, but but on the testimonial, focusing of transferring knowledge through words, through stories, through kind of personal point of interest, and form like even just patches of maps that are thinking with the possibilities of counter geography. And the other, I mean, I also call the name of the talk about that, but I'm trying, one of the terms that came, it's a legal term that then been expanded after the apartheid in South Africa, was obviously transitional justice. So I think we are in a kind of a double fold of thinking with colonialism here. One element is the Israeli colonialism of the occupied territory, but here we also have another digital colonialism of like this large scale companies that offer, that it's all about big scale, about one solution for all, and about about kind of new form of colonialism. So can we think, that's my kind of main question, can we think about this idea of transitional justice and adopt it into transitional technologies? What kind of transitional technologies, like, or how the transitional technologies will look like? Are they local? Are they small? Are they working towards minor technologies? There's a group in London that's working about similar question about minor technologies. And how can we think about minoritization of technology within the very specific locale of the Palestinian territories? So that's pretty much the set of concerns that are on my mind.